Today I want to talk about a topic that has had me perplexed for a bit. It's something not only in my own set of repos, but also in other people's repos, which I find that there will be people that will fork these repos, and I'm not really sure why. So I thought today would be a good time to go into discussing 5 reasons why I think people fork a lot of repos and offer maybe some better solutions, or maybe give some guidance on what forking a repo actually does, what's the purpose of it, and what benefits you can get from forking repos. Now, this is just going to be a bit of a discussion. We're going to try one out and see what that's about. As you can see here, I've even forked my own repos, but these are projects that I have worked on. So for instance, this one, when we were working on the e-commerce series that we did, this project hadn't been upgraded to whatever the Laravel version was. I can't remember, 2022. So it was probably Laravel 9 or 8 or what have you. I don't remember. But I did fork this repo because I wanted to make a correction to the code that was interfering with the installation for Laravel, because they hadn't yet accepted whatever pull requests were added by others to just fix the one bug that was affecting people's installs. And we needed it to be updated for our project. So that's why I have forked this particular project. Let's take a look at the 5 reasons for forking a repo that people have conveyed as the reason why they fork. And then we are going to discuss some other things along that. Now, one really strong reason to use forks is to basically not get around licensing, but let's say there's a public repository that's really popular, but there are forks within the licensing of that particular repo. When you fork it and have it as a local on your own code, and you can adjust it accordingly, create your own licenses for that fork. So that's one reason that people will do that, as to have that local copy. Another reason for that also is that there's just general interest. Whenever you download a repo from any particular account, it allows you to be able to look at it in your own system, on your own computer, however you operate or maneuver throughout it. And you can take a look and sort of dissect it, learn from it, and, that sort of a thing. So that's one broad scope as to why people might fork a repository. My second reason for forking a repository would be to contribute to some sort of open source project. So in this instance, even though I forked it to update it so that anyone who was following my tutorial would be able to use this package, if you're forking a repo, that means that you can send pull requests, and you can use branching, you can use all sorts of things to send a pull request for this project. Now, what I mean by that is if we go to this, you can see there are a bunch of pull requests here, and this is from other people who may want to contribute to this project and add the support. As you can see here, on some dates on the 23rd, people wanted to add the Laravel compatibility. Either they came up with a solution, put it on a pull request, and submitted it to the developers so that they would be able to upgrade their package to include support for Laravel 10. So these are closed, so they must have done that at that point. I haven't used this project in a while, so I don't know for sure, but since these are closed, I'm assuming that's already taken place. Now, there's another thing that supports Laravel versions 10, 11, 12. Being a part of this will allow you to contribute to this project, as long as the developer on the other end gives you that permission to do that and accepts those pull requests and integrates it with the entire project. Unless you know that they're going to do that, then you're just kind of submitting pull requests, which, at the end of the day could end up being a lot of fluff. Who knows? In this instance, it might just be because these are open as of 2024, and it looks like this one was from 2 weeks ago for 10, 11, and 12, which means they might not have updated to any of that. That's where that stands. Contributing to a project is definitely a great reason to fork a repository. Now, a third reason would be, let's say, I don't know that it is or isn't. I'm not trying to dog the developer or anything like that. This has nothing to do with that. It's just a general educational thing that happens to projects. So that's why I'm using this as an example. But the third reason that I have is that, let's say a project is abandoned, right? It is no longer being used. And I believe that this one is actually a fork of another project, forked from Crinsane Laravel shopping cart, and this project was abandoned. As you can see, there haven't been any commits on this for at least 7 years. And so forking that repository, Bumbunin forked this repository to pick up the reins, so to speak, on this project and create their own version of it where they were updating it, upkeeping it, or what have you. They were able to kind of keep the project going in that way. Now, a few things have to happen because sometimes developers will put certain permissions or restrictions on their projects, which will not allow you to do something like that. In this case, I do believe that Crinsane did give permission to Bumbunin to continue on with this project because, as you can see, it just wasn't going to be maintained anymore. And I think there's something down here saying something to that effect. I'm not sure. But anyway, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You never know. In this case, it's not written anywhere. It's understood that if that is the case, if Crinsane decided that they no longer wanted to support it, and it's pretty obvious that they didn't, there's an unspoken etiquette between developers. Using this example, Bumbunin would reach out to Crinsane and say, listen, you have this great project. I noticed you haven't been updating it at all for a long time. I was wondering, would it be a problem if I were to fork it? And in this way, Crinsane will give Bumbunin the opportunity to fork it and have it under their own name. And then what they would also be able to do is now submit it. Once they have that permission, they'll be able to submit it without any issue to Packagist so that he can now compile it under his own development name with whatever he wanted to call the project. And so that's why we'll be able to install it with the composer require, because it is now a Packagist package that is available to anyone to install. The really, really cool thing about doing it is that this is now letting everyone who comes to this repo know that this was forked from the original and this project had been continued on and was getting updated. And as you can see, there were more updates along the timeline here. That's what picking up the reins of an abandoned project really means. Bumbunin could have just taken this project, seeing that it was abandoned for so long, decided that they wanted to fork it and make it their own project, which, essentially what they did without even talking to Crinsane. But the issue is, as a general rule of common courtesy, Bumbunin would have reached out to Crinsane. Now, I don't know the specifics of any of this situation right here. As I said, I'm just using this as an example of the things that people don't really talk about when you are forking a repo, because I've watched a lot of tutorials and developers going through these things and they're saying, oh, just fork this and use it and whatever and submit this. But there is a courtesy involved with that. For someone to just take this and just use it, even on Packagist website, they tell you, make sure you get permission before you do this. And that's really also to protect them for the liability of Crinsane maybe saying, hey, that's my project, right? It is what it is. I'm just giving you the information. Now, yes, you do have MIT licensing, which you can definitely add to your project or whatever it is. That is very helpful, but there is a common courtesy involved with that. So that's just a really massive example of me just saying, this is a reason to fork a project. You want to pick up the reins on this project and move it along so that you can continue on supporting it, using it, and upgrading it for the community who uses this project. Now, the fourth reason that people will typically fork a project is to be a starting point for their own, which I think is why I will get a lot of forks on certain repositories of mine, especially when they're associated with the educational series that I do on YouTube. They are forked so that they can have a starting point to whatever their project is. Once you download it, then you can pretty much do whatever you want to that project, customize it however you want, and that's just that. The fifth and final reason that I really think is one of the bigger things, especially where we are at a point in time when we are starting to really discuss the archiving of code and the saving of code so that future generations of weirdos like us who like to use these projects to build other projects, or, just to have it so that they can learn from it and see how things worked, or just to have it as an archive or something like that, then forking a repo is another option to be able to do that. Now, in this same sort of idea, people will also want to do something like that, but they also might want to just keep it so that they can come back to it and see and have their own sort of archival system or record of maybe coming back and maybe in the future doing something with it, or even just, like I said, looking at how it works and sort of going into the depths of however this code works. Those are 5 reasons that I think that people will create a fork, and they are all valid reasons for doing so. But there are other options for doing a lot of what's on this list. For example, if we look at the GitHub docs under what forking a repo is, forking a repo, it creates a new repository in your account or whoever is doing it. It's going to have the visibility settings with the original upstream repository. So if it's a public repository, it's going to have that. And it explains to you that it's used really to maintain code with upstream, which would have been the previous original. For my example, would have been the original for me would have been from Bumbunit. They're often used to iterate on ideas or changes before they're proposed back to upstream. So what the GitHub documentation is saying is that these are really used to interact with the code in a way where you are contributing to this project or even creating a new project, but you are physically going to be doing something with this code when you have it. And that really is the intention of forking a repository. Now, another thing that you can do is you can clone a repository, which is a method that I prefer to use if I'm not going to contribute back to the project. If it's just something that I just want to take a look at the code, but I want to have it on my personal system to be able to do that and navigate through it and try stuff out without really affecting anything. Even though forking, you don't really necessarily have to affect the original repository, but it doesn't make sense for me to fork it if I just want to look at it and have a local copy. Now, the thing about cloning a repository is that sometimes you may not have permission to fork a public repo. People may not do it. And also, same thing for this, but most of the time people will allow you to clone it so that you can take a look because it is open source after all. But if developers don't want other people who are not official collaborators interacting with their code or code bases, then they will typically maybe block off forking and just really allow you to just clone it. And you can clone it to your thing. There won't be a separate repository made for it on your account. That's a huge difference between cloning and forking a repo, but it may be better for your use case depending on what you want to do. It all depends on what permissions that developer has given on the repository. Now, in the event that you just want to save the repository in terms of being able to come back to it quickly when you log into GitHub, or you may not remember exactly what it was called, you can go to your list of saved repositories, and then anything that you've starred will be listed there. So this is also a nice way without having to download anything and without making anything but really a beneficial contribution to someone's code base is to star them, because you get certain things with stars. There are little medals and stuff you can reach with them. And also it brings legitimacy to a repo when you star it. That's something that you can do too, where it has both benefits of supporting the developer of that project, as well as allowing you to have something to reference and to go back to. Now, of course, if someone deletes that repo, then that star will no longer be there. You won't have access to it because it's no longer available, because it's no longer on GitHub, or they've deleted it, or maybe they've privated or something to that effect. This is more about just being able to get back to it. So stars is an option. Usually I will star a repository, especially if it's something that I use often. I'll star that repo and then go do whatever it was I was going to do. But forking a repo for this isn't really doing anything. It will be on the developer's list of how many people have forked this project, but that could also be a good or bad thing. If someone continuously forks your project and you have no updates on it, then that sort of delegitimizes that project in a way where it's saying, if you're not going to update and you've got all these forks, then I really don't want to use your original project. I'm going to search for one of these forks that might be actively maintained. It is what it is, but that's how it is. You really have to find your own use cases for doing any of these things. What I want to do now is I want to create a test repository just so that you can see the difference between it, because I'm sure a lot of you have already cloned. You may not have ever forked anything, or you have and you just don't know the reason for why you forked it versus cloning or what have you. But I want to go into a quick example of it just so that you can see what it does. What I am going to do is I have logged into my dummies account and I am going to create a repo for this account. And then I'm going to hop over to the main designated coder account, and then we're going to download it and see how we do from there. So in here, I have created a testing forks folder, and as you can see, there is nothing in here. Let's go ahead and first create it as a repo. Now, the easiest way for me to do this is to use GitHub Desktop, especially because I'm using multiple accounts. So I'll go ahead and create a new repository, and we'll call it testing forks. So now we have a brand new repo. We can publish the repo and get it up to GitHub. Now I'm keeping it private and I don't have a README associated with it. We come over here and we refresh. I now have this testing forks repo and there's nothing in it and there's no README or anything in it. Great. So let's go ahead and open this up. And in here, I'm going to create a file. I'll just call it index.html because we are super, super fancy. And then I'm going to just do HTML5. Get rid of that, get rid of that. And we'll just say here, hello world. But because we are not great designers, that's all we have. We're going to come over here and we are going to commit this one to main. And then we are going to push the origin, refresh this. And now we have our new page in here, which is hello world. And in fact, I do want to change this from private to public so that I can fork it from the other account. So if we come back here, everything should be good. Let's see how we are going to do this. Now, to make things as easy as possible, I have logged out of the Nico's Dummy 6 account. I have logged into my designated coder account, and now I can access this account's testing forks public repo. What I can do now is I can just go ahead, fork it. It'll make a new copy, testing repos, copy the main branch. Everything will be the exact same as it is on there. So I'll go ahead, create the fork. And as you can see now, designated coder has its own version of this testing forks. And now we can start doing stuff with it. Now that we have it forked, everything we can do within here, but we want to use our code editor to do this, right? So I'll go to code, I'll go to SSH, and I will copy this just like a standard clone. Then I'll come in here and I'm going to back out of this one and I will do git clone. But before I press enter, I want to change this to testing forks copy. CD into that. And as you can see, we still have the main here. If we open it, you can see now we have access to that one file. Great. Let's say I want to make a change to this. Let's say I want to make it do something with this text. Because right now, if we look, it looks pretty blah because, you know, Nico's Dummy 6 doesn't know how to style anything. So let's style this up a bit. We'll do a div. And then we'll add some, I don't have Tailwind installed, so we'll just do style equals. We'll just make the text, let's see, font size is 15 pixels. Or I'll do 16 pixels. And the color will be, we'll just make it red. Yeah, we'll see what that looks like. Go ahead, refresh it, and take a look at that from our own copy. We did this. We want to help Nico's Dummy 6 by submitting this. We have this, but remember, this is the one that we first initialized with the Dummy 6 account. So what we can do is we can add a local repository, choose the path. This is it. Select, add repository, and now we can push this. We updated the index.html. Let's see if we can push it. Push origin. And now if we come over here, we refresh. Remember, we have a separate one now. As you can see on now ours, we are one commit ahead of Nico's Dummy 6 testing forks. That's a bit of an issue. What can we do? Well, we can create a pull request. I made your fonts awesome. For purposes of the demo, I'm going to send this to main. We'll go ahead, create pull request. And now it says designated coder wants to merge one commit to Nico's Dummy 6 from designated blah, blah, blah main, right? So we can't really do anything with it yet. There are no conflicts. GitHub has told us all of that. So let's go ahead and log in as the Nico's Dummy 6 because now nothing was pushed, but it looks like we got our first contribution. And now we can see we have this designated coder I made your fonts awesome, right? And now we can look at this and see, well, hey, look at that. They made our styling beautiful. It's gorgeous now. what do we want to do? We can review the changes and say, hey, okay, thanks. And then we'll approve it. Changes reviewed, one approving review by review is with write access, no conflicts. Now we can merge it. So it was merged, it should be closed. And now if we come over here, we have that update index. We are in the Nico's Dummy 6 one, and it is the index.html with our pretty red font and coloring. So as you can see, this is a pretty powerful interactive tool that you can use between developers. And I'm sure that Nico's Dummy 6 would be appreciative of this, but you can also see that now Nico's Dummy 6 and Designated Coder are both contributors to this. I think that's a really powerful thing to do, but as you can see, that's why forking exists. And it's not just to store code or just to save code. There's a lot of other reasons. What I would like you guys to do is let me know, why do you fork repos if you do? And if you haven't, have you thought about maybe wanting to contribute something to open source and didn't quite know how to do it? You would just fork it and just kind of have it on your system or whatever it is. I'm really curious to know. Let me know your thoughts on that. If you're enjoying the content, please go ahead and click that like button, as it really does help out the channel. Here's a video YouTube thinks you're going to like, and here's a playlist to follow along. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.